Lyra huddled beneath the jagged rock outcrop, her small frame trembling as the alien wind howled through the canyons. Zorith was not a place for the weak, and yet here she was, alone, stranded, with no hope of rescue. Her ship had been destroyed weeks ago, leaving her to fend for herself on this planet of endless danger. She had sent distress signals, but they disappeared into the void, unanswered. The creatures were the worst part. Zorith was teeming with monstrous beasts, all claws, teeth, and primal hunger. Lyra had seen them tear apart smaller creatures, their roars echoing through the dense bioluminescent jungle that stretched across the horizon. She had learned to stay hidden, moving only when the twin suns dipped below the horizon, cloaking the land in brief twilight. In those moments, she would scavenge what little she could find, berries from thorny bushes or water from streams, bitter but life-sustaining. Her people, the Zanari, were not built for this. Their lives were spent in peace, in harmony with nature, on a planet far from Zoritha's savagery. Lyra had been part of an exploratory mission, tasked with mapping the edges of uncharted space. But when they encountered a rogue faction of her own species, everything had gone wrong. Betrayed by those she once called kin, she had been cast away, left to die on this forsaken world. The sky darkened now, as it often did when the second sun set. Night on Zorith was a different kind of nightmare, silent, but filled with unseen eyes watching from the shadows. Lyra clutched the small device she had found days ago, her only source of hope. It was an ancient artifact, alien even to her, but its core glowed faintly, suggesting it still had power. If it was a beacon, perhaps someone, somewhere, would find her. But for now, it remained quiet, a cold comfort in her hands. A rustling noise broke her thoughts. Instinctively, Lyra pressed herself against the rock, her heart pounding in her chest. She peered into the gloom, her large, luminous eyes scanning for movement. There, in the trees. Something was watching her. She could sense its presence, a predator, no doubt. Her pulse quickened, and she gripped a crude spear she had fashioned from a fallen branch and sharp stone. The creature didn't move closer, but it didn't retreat either. Its glowing eyes flickered between the trees, waiting, observing. Lyra knew this game. Zoritha's monsters often toyed with their prey, stalking them for hours before striking. She had learned to avoid conflict when possible, but there was no escaping a fight forever. As she braced herself, something unexpected happened. A light, distant, flickering, appeared in the sky. Lyra's heart leaped. It wasn't the monster. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a ship. Could it be a rescue? For the first time in weeks, she dared to hope. Captain James Carter stood in the cockpit of the Horizon, staring at the planet below through the viewport. Zorith, a world filled with jagged mountains, glowing jungles, and dangers lurking in every shadow. His crew had been exploring nearby systems when they intercepted a faint distress signal from the surface. It wasn't one of their own. The frequency was unfamiliar, alien. "What do you think, Captain?" Lieutenant Reed asked, adjusting his headset. "Could be a trap. Or it could be someone who needs help," Carter replied. His eyes never left the planet. He had seen enough of the galaxy to know that not every rescue mission was straightforward, but he also knew what it meant to be stranded. Alone. "Prepare a team. We're going down." The shuttle broke through Zoritha's atmosphere with a low hum, turbulence rattling the walls as the dense cloud cover gave way to the planet's hostile surface. Carter checked his gear, rifle, comms, rations. Zorith wasn't a welcoming place. The ship's scanners had already picked up multiple lifeforms, most of them large and predatory. Still, the signal was coming from a specific location deep within the jungle. Whoever sent it was likely in trouble. "We've got movement on the ground," Reed said, monitoring the scanner. "Big ones. They're not far from the signal source. Keep us clear of any unnecessary encounters," Carter ordered, focusing on the mission. "We're in and out." The shuttle touched down in a small clearing, the dense vegetation pressing in on all sides. The air was thick with humidity, and the bioluminescent plants bathed the landscape in an eerie glow. Carter led the team out, weapons raised and senses alert. He could feel eyes on them, though he couldn't yet see the creatures that were surely watching from the shadows. "Captain, over here," Reed called softly, gesturing toward a rock outcrop where the signal was strongest. Carter approached cautiously, his eyes scanning the area. And then he saw her. Huddled beneath the rocks was a small figure, her skin faintly glowing in the dim light. She was alien, tall, slender, with delicate features and wide, luminous eyes. Her clothes were tattered, and her face bore the marks of exhaustion and fear. "She's Zanari," Carter said under his breath, recognizing the species. He had read about them, peaceful explorers, not warriors. No wonder she looked so out of place on a world like Zorith. Lyra flinched as the humans approached, her eyes widening with fear. She clutched a crude spear, raising it defensively, though her grip was weak. Carter slowly raised his hands in a gesture of peace, lowering his rifle. "We're not here to hurt you," he said gently. "We're here to help." Lyra didn't lower the spear, but her trembling betrayed her fear more than her determination to fight. Carter took a cautious step forward, his voice calm and steady. "We picked up your signal. We can take you off this planet. You're safe now." For a moment, Lyra hesitated. Then, slowly, she lowered the spear, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. I thought I was alone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not anymore," Carter replied. "Let's get you home." Lyra sat near the small fire, her hands wrapped around a metal cup filled with warm broth. The human captain, James, as he had introduced himself, sat across from her, watching her with a quiet, patient gaze. His team moved around them, setting up camp in the jungle's clearing, but James stayed close, making sure she was comfortable. The heat from the fire was comforting, but Lyra's mind was still spinning. She had never imagined a rescue, especially not from humans. The stories she had heard of them were filled with awe and fear. Humans were resilient, stubborn, and known for their unmatched ability to survive. She had never met one before today. "I still can't believe you found me," Lyra said softly, her voice still shaky. She glanced up, meeting James's eyes for a moment before looking away. "I thought no one would ever come." "We were lucky to pick up your signal," James replied. He leaned forward, his tone kind but curious. "What happened to you? How did you end up here?" Lyra hesitated. She had spent so long in isolation that speaking to someone else felt foreign. But James's presence, calm and steady, made her feel safe enough to talk. She took a deep breath and began. "My ship, we were on an exploration mission. We didn't expect trouble, but we ran into a rogue faction of my own people." Her voice faltered, and her eyes darkened with the memory of betrayal. "They attacked us. I don't know why. We were peaceful, explorers. I was the only one who survived. They left me here to die." James nodded, his expression grim. "That's rough. I've seen situations like that before. Sometimes, it's greed, power, or fear that drives people to turn on their own. It doesn't make it right." Lyra looked at him, surprised by his understanding. "You've experienced betrayal?" "More than once," he said with a small, bitter smile. "But out here, survival comes first. And right now, you surviving is our top priority." The jungle around them was alive with sounds, distant growls, the rustling of unseen creatures, and the occasional screech from something in the trees. Lyra had grown accustomed to the constant threat of Zoritha's wildlife, but now, with the humans around her, she felt a strange sense of security. "We need to get off this planet," James said, breaking the silence. "But it's not going to be easy. This place is crawling with monsters, and from what you've said, your people might still be looking for you. Lyra nodded. They are. If they find me, they'll kill me. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen, James said firmly. You've survived this long, and now you have us. We'll get you out of here. Lyra's heart swelled with a feeling she hadn't felt in so long, hope. For the first time since her crash, she wasn't alone. And for the first time, she had someone willing to fight for her. Thank you, she whispered, her voice soft but sincere. James gave her a nod, standing up. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start planning how to get out of this hellhole. Lyra watched as he walked away, his confident stride making her believe that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this together. The ground shook as another monstrous roar echoed through the jungle. Lyra's heart raced as she and James ran through the dense underbrush, the glowing plants casting eerie shadows around them. Behind them, the ground rumbled with the heavy footsteps of a Zorathian predator, its massive, hulking form tearing through the foliage as it pursued them. We're almost there. James shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. He pointed ahead, where the distant silhouette of the horizon loomed, waiting for their escape. They had fought their way across miles of hostile terrain, fending off creatures and evading Lyra's enemies. Now, it all came down to this. Lyra's legs burned with exhaustion, but she pushed forward. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to rest, but the fear of capture, and worse, kept her moving. She could hear the snarling creature getting closer, its hot breath on their heels. The alien world seemed determined to claim them. Ahead, the clearing that led to the ship opened up. But just as hope began to swell in Lyra's chest, a new threat emerged, figures materialized from the shadows. The rogue Zanari faction, led by the one who had betrayed her, stood between them and the ship. Their weapons gleamed in the dim light, their eyes cold and unforgiving. Looks like we're not getting out of this the easy way, James muttered, pulling his rifle from his back. His face was set in grim determination. Stay close. Lyra's hands tightened around the alien weapon James had given her. Her pulse quickened, fear threatening to overtake her. She had never been a fighter, not like James. But she wasn't the same frightened girl who had been abandoned here. She had survived Zoratha's monsters, and she would survive this too. The leader of the Zanari stepped forward, his voice cold. You should have stayed hidden, Lyra. You can't escape. I'm not running anymore, Lyra replied, her voice stronger than she expected. James raised his weapon, his eyes scanning the area. We're getting to that ship, one way or another. The standoff lasted only seconds before chaos erupted. Blaster fire lit up the clearing as the Zanari opened fire. James moved like lightning, ducking behind cover and returning shots with deadly precision. Lyra followed his lead, her hands trembling but steadying as she aimed and fired. Each shot sent waves of energy toward their enemies, forcing them to take cover. But then the ground shook again, louder this time. The Zorathian predator had caught up, crashing through the trees behind them. It was a hulking mass of muscle and scales, its eyes gleaming with hunger. In its frenzy, it charged toward both groups, caring little for the distinction between human and Zanari. The predator barreled into the enemy lines, scattering them. James seized the moment. Now! Move! Lyra ran with him, dodging blaster fire and the swinging tail of the beast. Together, they raced toward the horizon, the massive predator causing havoc behind them. As they neared the ramp, James turned, firing one last shot that hit the Zanari leader, dropping him to the ground. Lyra didn't look back. She followed James up the ramp and into the safety of the ship. As the hatch sealed behind them, the distant sounds of the battle faded. Breathless and covered in dirt, Lyra looked at James, who smiled grimly. Told you we'd get out. She smiled back, the weight of fear finally lifting from her chest. I never doubted it. The horizon lifted off, leaving Zorath and its dangers far below. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Lyra was free.